She wasn't stealing that bread. She was rescuing it, giving it a second chance, just like someone once gave her. That's what I understand now. But back then, at 3 a.m., in the sterile chill of the storeroom, none of that made sense. All I saw was a woman moving slowly, deliberately, peeling expired stickers off old loaves like each label carried a secret. Every motion was careful, almost reverent. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't hiding. And yet, she wasn't supposed to be there. She rewrapped those loaves so perfectly they looked untouched, like fresh stock ready for the shelf. My mind raced ahead of what my eyes were witnessing. She's stealing, I told myself, feeling a sick twist of vindication in my gut. The quiet one. The waitress no one noticed, always polite, always on time. I thought I had her. I thought I was the hero of this little mystery, the one who would finally catch the lie beneath the silence. But the lie wasn't hers. It was mine. My name is Jackson. I'm 45. For 12 years, I've been CEO of this company. In my world, there's no room for gut feelings or gray areas. There's profit, there's loss. People lie, numbers don't. 3 weeks ago, the numbers started whispering. Inventory at one store had begun to shrink, little by little. Nothing dramatic, just bread. Always bread. Quiet, consistent disappearances. I demanded answers, got none. So I stripped off the suit, ditched the entourage, and walked into my own store wearing a janitor's cap and thrift store boots. No cameras, no clipboard. Just me, chasing a gut instinct I swore I didn't believe in. Because I've learned, every problem wears a face. I came here to find it. The place barely resembled the blueprint I'd signed off on years ago. The exterior sagged like it carried grief. The walls were stained, the windows thick with the weight of forgotten time. Even the neon sign flickered, gasping for attention like an old man too tired to speak. Inside, it was worse. The smell hit first, not fresh, not inviting. Just old flour, sour air, and fatigue. 3 customers milled about, 2 silent men, and a woman who counted her coins twice before settling for a cold sandwich. That store didn't just feel empty, it felt abandoned. Like a story paused in the middle, never to be resumed. That's when I saw her. Marisol. She worked the graveyard shift, always alone, always composed, never idle, never chatting. She moved through her tasks like she was balancing more than just plates, like the weight of something invisible pressed down on her shoulders. I watched her, hour after hour. She didn't flinch, didn't complain. She noticed every mess before it happened, every detail before it needed fixing. But there was one thing she did that unsettled me. At the end of every shift, she'd walk to the front window, not to look out, just to stand there, hands folded, back straight, staring into the dark. For 5 minutes. Sometimes more. Never speaking, never moving, like she was waiting for someone who'd never come back, and I couldn't look away. Most people work for something, money, survival, escape. But Marisol? She worked like she owed someone something deep, unspoken. She wasn't fast, she wasn't flashy. She was careful. Not because she was being watched, but because she was watching herself. Every task, every motion, it was ritual, not routine, not pride, not fear. Control, total, unflinching control. I studied her, tried to catch her slipping, skimming from the register, hoarding supplies. But she never did. Her till matched, her tips untouched. Her supplies were accounted for. Nothing explained the missing inventory. Nothing except her silence, her stillness. By midnight, I'd made my decision. No more theories. I would follow her, watch her, find out for myself what she was hiding. Her shift ended at 3 a.m. No goodbyes, no lingering. She grabbed an old canvas bag and stepped into the night like it was part of her skin. I counted to 10, then slipped out after her, silent, careful, my boots echoing faintly behind her steps. She didn't sneak. She walked straight, with a quiet kind of determination. Past the gas station, past the silent homes and flickering streetlights. She never looked back, never paused. And as the minutes passed, so did my certainty. This wasn't a detour. This was a destination. And then, she turned. Not toward home, not toward anything at all. She walked toward the edge of town, toward the cemetery. I stopped, just stood there in the dark, my breath caught in my throat, watching her small frame disappear into the stillness. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. This wasn't about bread anymore. This was about grief, and the secrets we carry when no one's looking. My thoughts lagged behind my footsteps. The cemetery? At this hour? With bread? It didn't make sense, but she walked like it did. Like this path wasn't strange at all, but familiar. So I kept following, each step echoing louder in my chest than on the cracked sidewalks beneath me. We passed rusted fences, the shell of an abandoned factory that hadn't breathed life in a decade. The night was cold, but something deeper gripped me, a kind of dread dressed in curiosity. She reached the gates, wrought iron, flaking black, bent at the hinges. She stepped through as if they were her front door. I stopped outside. Something in me hesitated. My breath fogged the air, tight and quick. My mind ran wild, trying to attach meaning to this scene. A woman alone, entering a graveyard with carefully wrapped loaves of bread. It didn't add up, not to anything I knew. She walked through the headstones with a strange grace, measured, calm, like each footstep had memory etched into the soil. No fear, no urgency, just purpose. Then, she paused. One grave. She knelt, pulled a loaf from her bag. Old bread, cleaned and neatly wrapped like a gift from another life. She laid it at the foot of the stone with the gentleness of someone delivering more than bread. No words, no prayer, just silence. Her hands dropped to her sides, her head bowed, stillness. And then, she left. No glance back, no ritual of farewell. I couldn't move, couldn't understand. Bread on a grave. Who does that? And why did she look so peaceful? I returned the next night. Then again, and again. It became a quiet obsession. Every night the same ritual. She chose a different grave each time. Always one loaf, sometimes two. Freshly wrapped, delivered with silent care, like offerings to ghosts no one else remembered. She didn't rush. She didn't hide, and that haunted me more than if she had. From behind gates, behind trees, behind gravestones, I watched, but never close enough to interrupt. Why bread? Why this devotion? I ran through every possibility. Was it religion? A forgotten tradition? Some quiet madness cloaked in grief? I'd dealt with sabotage, with deceit, with crime so complex it required lawyers in 3 cities. But nothing in my experience could explain this. And yet, each night, she came back. And each night, I watched the mystery grow. By the 6th night, I was unraveling. My mind circled through theories like a dog chasing its tail. None of them fit. None of them felt human enough, painful enough. She didn't act like someone haunted by guilt. There was no anxiety in her steps, only conviction. What unsettled me most wasn't her secrecy. It was her calm. The way she moved like this wasn't strange, like placing bread on graves was simply what you do when love has nowhere else to go. I told myself, one more night. Then I'd confront her. Then I'd understand. On the 7th night, the rhythm changed. Her bag was heavier. Her shoulder dipped under the weight of more loaves than usual. That shift, that one tiny change, pushed me past the edge. I was done spectating, done wondering. This time I followed her through the gates, no longer hiding, no longer pretending. She chose 3 graves. One by one, she placed a loaf of bread at each. Then she turned toward a 4th. That's when I stepped out from the shadows. "Stop," I said. She froze. No panic, no shock, just stillness, as if she'd been expecting this moment. I stepped closer. My voice cracked the quiet. "What are you doing?" She didn't speak, didn't flinch. Her back remained straight, the bread still in her hands. I saw her fingers tighten around it, barely, as if she were holding something fragile, sacred. I expected lies, excuses, even fear. But when she turned and met my eyes, there was none of that. Just exhaustion. And something deeper, like I was the trespasser. The silence stretched. I asked again, this time softer. "Tell me, what is this?" A long beat. The wind moved through the trees. Then finally, her voice, barely above a whisper. "I can't explain." That chilled me more than any elaborate lie ever could. She didn't sound evasive. She sounded sure. And broken. I waited, hoping she'd keep talking. Instead, she looked at me, not with defensiveness, not with shame, but with a calm certainty that told me she wasn't hiding anything from me. She just believed I could never understand. And she was probably right. I pushed again, almost pleading now. "Who are you bringing this bread to?" No answer, so I stepped closer. "Marisol, please." She looked down at the loaf like it was something more than food, something alive with memory. Then finally, she said the words that stopped my breath cold. "It's for my husband." 4 words. 4 words that redefined every night I had watched her. Every step, every offering, every silence. She looked up at me. No tears, no defenses. Just truth. Heavy and unshakable. "For my husband." In that moment, I wasn't a CEO. I wasn't an investigator. I was just a man standing in front of a mystery carved from grief. A man who had believed he was hunting a thief, only to find a widow keeping promises in the dark. And for once, I had no words, no judgment, just silence, and the hollow ache of realizing some stories aren't puzzles to be solved. They're heartbeats trying not to fade. She turned from me without another word, calm, deliberate. She placed that final loaf down, gentle like a goodbye, and walked into the darkness like it welcomed her. I didn't follow. I couldn't. My legs refused to move, frozen in the weight of everything I didn't yet understand. Her voice echoed in my head. "For my husband." 4 simple words that carried more weight than all my spreadsheets, my suspicions, my logic. I told myself it didn't make sense. But deep down, it did. In that raw, unspoken place where grief lives and reason doesn't matter. And that quiet realization terrified me more than any theft ever could. I stood there long after she disappeared into the shadows. Just me and the grave she'd visited. The bread sat at its base, wrapped neatly, untouched. No name on the stone, just the silence. I stared at it, needing more than answers now. I needed understanding. Because somewhere between the numbers I chased and the stories I ignored, she had become more than a mystery. She'd become the question I couldn't stop asking. The next morning I didn't go to the office. I didn't read reports. I went to her. She was wiping tables when I walked in. Like always, quiet, methodical, like the night before had never happened. But I had changed, and I couldn't pretend. No more disguise, no more distance. I walked straight to her, every step fueled by something heavier than duty. "We need to talk," I said. She looked up, tired but not surprised, like she'd known this moment was coming. She didn't argue, didn't smile, just wiped her hands and waited. "I'm not leaving until you explain," I told her. She set the cloth down and said, "I'm working." "Not anymore," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "Tell me, why the bread? Why the graves? Why your husband?" And for the first time since I'd met her, something shifted in her eyes. Not fear, not frustration, something closer to surrender. She looked around the empty cafe, then back at me. Her voice came soft, almost emotionless. "Fine, you want to know? Follow me." She sat down, her hands folded, her posture straight. A stillness filled the space between us. "My husband was a baker," she began. Her eyes weren't on me. They looked past me, into a place I couldn't see. Every morning before his shift ended, he'd bring me bread, not leftovers, fresh, warm. He said it wasn't breakfast unless it came from his hands. She paused then, swallowing a memory. "And every time, he said the same thing. I'll always bring you fresh bread. Always." Her voice cracked. Just slightly. But she didn't stop. He said it that morning too. Before the accident. Before the call. The words landed like stones in a still pond. No detail. No embellishment. Just finality. I never got that last loaf. She finally looked at me. Her eyes weren't red, but they shimmered. A kind of sorrow too deep for tears. "So now," I bring it to him. The way she said it, flat, matter-of-fact, broke something in me. She continued, her voice steady, hollow. "It was fast, a car that didn't stop. A call at 4 a.m., a name spoken once, that's all. No explanation, just silence after." She said the house felt colder. The mornings, heavier. She stopped making coffee. Stopped opening curtains. Stopped buying butter. The refrigerator stayed empty for weeks. At first, she waited for him to come home. When he didn't, she waited for the mornings to stop hurting. When they didn't, she started working nights. "It's easier to miss someone in the dark," she said quietly. Her words sounded like facts, but her hands betrayed her. Trembling softly, clutching at nothing. I didn't interrupt. Grief doesn't like interruptions. It only speaks when you're quiet enough to hear it. Then one morning, she said, I realized he wasn't coming back. But the promise, that was still waiting. So she made a choice, not dramatic, not loud, just quiet and unwavering. If he couldn't keep the promise, she said, I would. She started small. One loaf, left before sunrise, no ceremony, no prayer, just bread. Not for me, she whispered, for him. She didn't care who saw. She wasn't explaining. She wasn't seeking healing. She was keeping something alive, their promise, their rhythm, the simplest piece of their love. 3 years of mornings, 3 years of walking alone through dark streets to a grave no one else visited. No one knew, not her co-workers, not her friends, not even family. This was between me and him, she said. Always was. She never missed a day. Not in rain, not in snow, not even with a fever. Sometimes the bread was fresh. Sometimes it was day old. But it was always warm, always wrapped, always waiting. She spoke like it was normal. Like this act of silent devotion was no different than brushing your teeth. I wasn't trying to move on, she added. I just wanted to keep one part of him alive. And somehow, I understood. It wasn't grief anymore. It was ritual, memory, a love story told in crust and flour, a story that refused to end just because one of them did. Then she said something else. Not every loaf was for him. Some were for others. Customers, people who used to sit at the far booth, people who laughed too loud, who always ordered the same pastry, a man who read the paper cover to cover, a woman who always asked for extra butter, a little boy who only smiled when given free samples. Names forgotten by the till, but never by her. They stopped coming. Slowly, quietly, like morning shadows fading under a rising sun. The customers who used to fill her mornings disappeared, one by one. Age, time, life, they took their toll. And in time, she learned where they'd gone. Not to other cafes, not to other cities, to final addresses marked by stones and silence. So she started leaving bread for them too. Different graves, same ritual. She remembered what they liked, what they always ordered. One loaf placed like a final gesture, careful, respectful. Not just bread, but memory. Not a meal, but a goodbye finished late. I serve them, she whispered, almost to herself. That image never left me. Graves lined not with flowers but with loaves, wrapped, still warm, each one saying, "I remember." They weren't acts of charity. They weren't about mourning. They were about presence, about love refusing to be erased by time. Her hands trembled as she sat across from me, but she kept them folded, tight in her lap, holding something together I couldn't see. "I couldn't bring them back," she said, her voice barely above the hum of the empty cafe. "But I couldn't forget them either." And then the quiet cracked. I just wanted to keep serving them. It wasn't said with drama. It was said with truth, quiet, undeniable, and heavy. "That's all I know how to do," she added. And when she looked at me, finally, her eyes didn't spill over. The tears stood still, anchored, unshaken, just like her. Because some grief doesn't cry. It sits inside, solid as stone. "I thought," she continued, "if I kept bringing them bread, maybe they wouldn't feel forgotten." And in that moment, I understood something I'd never seen. Not in reports, not in numbers. She wasn't feeding the dead. She was feeding the part of herself that still believed in showing up. I didn't speak. What could I possibly say? I just sat there and let the silence do the talking. Because that's what love sounds like when it has no audience, when it doesn't need one. And for the first time, I saw her clearly, not as a worker, not as a liability, but as a woman quietly carrying everything she'd lost, and still choosing to give. After a long pause, my voice came out softer than I expected. "Tomorrow morning," I said, "take me with you." She blinked, hesitated. But she didn't say no. She just nodded once, then stood up, returned to wiping tables. No drama, no closure, just purpose. That morning felt colder than usual. We walked in the silence, her steps steady, mine unsure. At the gates of the cemetery, she stopped. Without a word, she handed me a loaf of bread. "For him," she said gently. I held it awkwardly, like I was touching something I wasn't meant to. Something sacred. She led me to his grave. The same one I'd watched her visit so many nights from a distance. But this time, I was beside her. She knelt, placed her loaf down with reverence. Then she looked at me, waiting. I followed her lead. Slowly, carefully, I knelt, placed mine next to hers. And for reasons I didn't fully understand, my hands trembled. There were no words exchanged, no instructions, just that small, silent act. But something shifted inside me, not clarity, not resolution, just peace. The kind that comes from finally seeing something true. Back at headquarters, I sat alone with my thoughts. And then, I rewrote the policy myself. No more automatic waste. No more disposal orders stamped in red ink. From now on, day-old bread could be taken home by anyone. For anyone. We called it Memory Mornings, a small note on the employee board. Simple. Quiet. But it meant something. If you had someone to remember, if there was a promise you never kept, or a goodbye you never gave, now you could. No questions asked, no forms. Just one loaf, one visit, one memory. Some thought it strange, an odd indulgence from a CEO growing sentimental. But I knew the truth. And so did she. Sometimes bread isn't food. Sometimes it's a message, it's memory, and memory needs to be served. At first, it was just Marisol. But then others followed. A young cashier took a loaf to her mother's grave. A cook began leaving pastries where his brother used to sit in silence. A janitor dropped muffins at the park bench where his childhood friend used to dream out loud. No meetings, no announcements, no explanations. Just bread. Wrapped in quiet, carried in tired hands, not as waste, not as charity, as remembrance. I watched it happen, watched people heal in silence. Our stores didn't change, but something inside our people did. And that's when I realized what had taken me far too long to see. Food isn't always about hunger. Sometimes it's about remembering. And the people who matter most? They're the ones we still feed, even after they're gone. I used to count bread as numbers, inventory, loss, profits. But now, I see something else. Each loaf that leaves our store is no longer leftover. It's a letter, a prayer, a quiet goodbye that speaks when words can't. Because sometimes we don't get to say it. Not in time, not with the right words. So instead, we leave a piece of bread. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. I think about Marisol's promise, about her husband, about all the graves no one visits anymore, and I realize she wasn't feeding the dead. She was feeding love. And now, so do we. I used to run a business. Now I carry something heavier. I carry the weight of goodbyes, and every morning I let my people carry it too. If you ever pass by the cemetery at dawn, you might see it. Rows of graves, still, quiet, and at the foot of many stones, a loaf of bread, some small, some perfect, some misshapen, but all placed with care. No names, no notes, just memory. Left behind by people who once served a meal, shared a story, touched a life, and now say goodbye in flower and silence. I stand at the gate sometimes, just watching, not speaking, because I've learned nothing I say could matter more than those loaves. The bread speaks for them now. Now I walk behind her every morning. No clipboard, no disguise, no numbers, just quiet steps on cold ground. She carries the bread. I carry the silence. She doesn't look back. She doesn't need to. I'm not her boss here. I'm just another person keeping a promise I never made and never will break. One grave at a time, one loaf, one memory. Bread may grow old, but love never does. So if you're listening, if there's a promise you forgot, a goodbye left unsaid, a name you still carry, maybe it's not too late. Maybe, like her, you can still show up. One morning, one loaf, one memory at a time. And if you do, tell this story. Let someone else remember too.